Hey everyone, welcome back to the workshop. Artisan Pirate here, and in today's fun scroll saw project video, I have a beautiful fretwork fish design from an older issue of Scroll Saw Woodworking and Crafts magazine by Fox Chapel Publishing. I've already got the pattern printed out to the size I want, prepped and attached to our material with clear packing tape. And here is the magazine in question. It has this nice Intarsia giraffe on the cover. Spring 2024, issue 94 for those curious. And there you see a visual representation of the project we're going to be making in today's video. The pattern and the article begins on page 40, and it says Layered Fish Ornaments. Scroll, a school of swimming fretwork decorations. That is a tongue twister by Keith Fenton, so thank you for the amazing designs. And the ones featured here in the magazine were cut by Mr. Joe Pass. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that last name, but there it is. Hopefully it comes up on camera. But it has a nice article here on how to make these as intended to be little ornaments, and the patterns, some of them follow on the following page, with the rest of the patterns and designs featured in the pattern pull-out section that's included in the magazine. But there you see the smallmouth bass design that we are going to be making in today's video, and you can see how small it is. It's very minute in nature, again intended to be ornaments. But I have once again used artist visual interpretation to use the pattern in a different way. I took a picture of that pattern I just showed you with my cell phone. There you see it there, and I sent it to my computer and I printed it out to the size that I wanted, and that is what we have prepped and ready to go. And we're going to be doing some stack cutting in today's video. We're going to be stack cutting through 3 layers of 1/4 inch material, so 6 layers here in total for the scroll work and the backer board. And when you're cutting through that much material and you're stack cutting, you need to of course take your time and let the blade do the work and be as loyal as you can be to the cut line to make sure everything comes out precisely and cleanly. And I hope it goes without saying that with stack cutting through 3/4 inches in thickness, you need to of course double check and make sure that your scroll saw is dialed in at a perfect 90 degrees. But as you see, these were intended to be ornaments, so they have the hoop at the top of both the scroll work and the backer board. We're just going to cut through those over at the scroll saw. We will not cut that hoop out, because the way I see this project displayed and envisioned in my head is to be just a nice piece of rustic wall art. I think it would look good in a rustic man cave and a log cabin. If you have a rack of fishing rods, you know, you could decorate it with these if you cut them out bigger or smaller. So a lot of uses for just one single scroll saw pattern. And I also wanted to enlarge the design to hopefully let it come across better visually over here on camera while I was at the scroll saw. But since everything is pretty much prepped and ready to go, and all we need to do is drill the pilot holes, let's move the camera and do that now. And over here on the workbench, we will take the Seiko scroller's drill and drill out all of the pilot holes for internal cutting. And you'll note that I have a backer board behind the scroll saw work to prevent blowout of the pilot holes on the reverse side. But before we start scrolling, I will double check to make sure that the scroll saw is dialed in at a perfect 90 degrees with my 3D printed blade alignment jig. And when I'm happy with that, we will thread the blade through the first pilot hole, and we will be ready to begin scrolling. I will begin with some of the smaller internal cuts before proceeding to the larger internal cuts. And for all of the scrolling on this project, I'll be using a number 5 Ultra reverse tooth blade, and it will cut through all of the material exceptionally well with minimal chip out, which is always good when it comes time for sanding. And keep in mind, we are stack cutting through 3 layers of 1/4 inch material, so that roughly totals around 3/4 inches in thickness that the scroll saw blade is cutting through. So I am of course taking my time and letting the blade do the work, because it is a much slower cut as opposed to just cutting out one single layer of 1/4 inch material. And also be aware, if you stack cut multiple layers like I'm doing, the internal cuts, when you get done cutting them, that waste wood can potentially bind within the material when you get done with the cut and want to potentially break away the scroll saw work you have done. So just be careful when you complete an internal cut when stack cutting. And this project does have some of those tight V-turns in the design, and you guys know how I take care of those. I will go in one side of the V, and then I will back it back out and go into the other side to get that V point as narrow as the pattern calls for. And I'll show you how I do that with the close-up view here. And hopefully this view shows you guys how loyal I am trying to be to the pattern's cut line. But here we'll do one of those tight V-turns, and you see how I achieve that before proceeding to release the rest of the waste wood. If you guys would like to try this pattern, it's available in an older issue of Scroll Saw Woodworking and Crafts magazine by Fox Chapel Publishing. I always look forward to getting those magazines in the mail because they are packed with creative scroll saw woodworking designs like the one I am doing here. And I am, of course, taking my time and letting the blade do the work and being as loyal as I can be to the cut line. And you will see how I will carefully remove all of that waste wood from time to time if it wants to grab and bind. But this is why I like doing a lot of stack cutting, because it can help offer a form of support to the delicate scroll saw work you are trying to cut out. And that's especially true if you get into a lot of delicate fretwork over on the scroll saw. But it took me around 40 minutes to scroll everything out completely from start to finish. Again, it is a very slow cut, and again, just taking my time and letting the blade do the work. But now we will begin with that final internal cut here, and it is the largest internal cut, and I always try to save the biggest internal cut for last, because the more material you remove from a project, the more fragile it becomes. But once we come back around here, we will be ready to retension the blade and begin releasing the pieces from the waste wood completely. And that's just simply following that long outside perimeter cut line. If you guys like what you're seeing, I would highly encourage you to subscribe to my channel and also follow me across all my social media feeds under the Artisan Pirate name. I'd really appreciate the support. And a project like this, with the subject matter being fish and fishing, it really brought back a lot of those memories of me and my late grandfather dropping a line by a lake, a pond, or a river. It brought back all those memories of me and him fishing together that will last a lifetime. But we are now cutting out and releasing the backer boards, which is also 3 layers of 1/4 inch material that we are stack cutting through in a single pass. But once we come back around here, all of the scroll saw work for today will be complete, and we'll step over to the workbench and remove the pieces from the waste wood. And I did add a piece of poster board between the layers to get a stencil of the design, and we'll talk about that as we close the video. But I'll get 1 fish and 1 backer board, and we will sand the front and back side very carefully with 180 grit Klingspor Woodworking Shop sandpaper and the vibrating palm sander here. I didn't want to break away any of that delicate scroll saw work we done. But I will give everything a splash of color. I'll stain the actual scroll saw work a very light Minwax wood stain. This still allows the natural grains and textures to shine through. And I'll hang it on a hook to dry, and we'll stain the backer board with a darker shade of Minwax wood stain and wipe off all of the excess and set it aside to dry. But after everything was dry to the touch, it was time to begin the glue up process, and I used medium grade CA glue and activator for this. And even though the glue basically bonds and dries instantly, I still like to use spring clamps and occasionally a strip of wood to help add pressure to the center details to make sure that the glue is grabbing in all areas. But I will set it aside to dry for around 5 minutes, and then I will come back and remove the clamps, and we will be ready to apply a finish. And for finishing, I used several coats of Rust-Oleum clear gloss, and I clear coated it by the door to allow for some ventilation. And when the project dried, it was complete. And here we have the completed Rustic Fretwork fish design, cut out completely over on the scroll saw, and it finished up beautifully with some beautiful and delicate details in it. Thank you, Mr. Keith Fenton, for the beautiful pattern from a previous issue of Scroll Saw Woodworking and Crafts magazine. I'll show you guys that magazine momentarily. Really, really cool here. It took me around 40 minutes to scroll everything out completely from start to finish. And even though the scroll work and backer board is just thin 1/4 inch material, and that traditionally cuts a lot quicker over on the scroll saw, keep in mind we were stack cutting through 3 layers of 1/4 inch material, so it was a lot slower than normal cut. So I did what I always do, and I took my time and I let the blade do the work, and I was as loyal as I could be to the cut line, and hopefully the results here speak for themselves. But really, really beautiful how it came out. I'm really happy with it. It has a lot of delicate details in it, and that's another reason why I like to stack cut whenever possible, to offer some form of support to these delicate areas to where they won't potentially break away during the scroll saw process. I hope that makes sense. I finished it in a standard rustic finishing way. That is why I call it a rustic fretwork fish. I stained the main bulk of the scroll saw work a light minwax wood stain, and I stained the backer board here a darker minwax wood stain, and then after everything was glued together, we gave it a finish of several coats of Rust-Oleum clear gloss, and that really made the grains, colors, and textures of the material here, the 1/4 inch material we used, pop. You can see that nice glossy sheen there reflected in the shop light. But really, really beautiful. A design like this really makes me think of my late grandfather, who taught me scroll saw woodworking out here. When we was not out here making sawdust, we was dropping a line, so to speak, out at a fishing hole or lake, and the stories he told me are memories that will last a lifetime, and also the cherished memories of just fishing with my grandfather. Hopefully I can get back to fishing one day soon when the weather breaks. It's something that I love to do. I just don't get to do it enough. But really happy with how this came out. You can really tell what it is. It is the iconic smallmouth bass. That is what we traditionally fish for here in my area in North Carolina. The smallmouth and the largemouth bass counterpart are the common fish in my area. But of course the magazine in the full-size pattern pull-out section had additional patterns for different styles of fishes if you guys did not want to cut out the smallmouth bass. And because we stack cut, we have 2 additional projects that we can finish behind the camera, behind the scenes, so to speak. Or if I want to, I can pass these along to fellow woodworkers and makers who might like to fish, might have a lake house or something like that, and want to add this piece to their decor in their garage, workshops, or even a log cabin. So always cool to stack cut and make multiples. And you guys seen in today's video, I also sandwiched a piece of basic dollar store poster board in between those 1/4 inch layers, and that provided me with a perfect stencil to use here. When I was real young and was doing the scroll saw woodworking, I done this hack, this little trick here a lot, because I wanted to hopefully get into airbrushing. I thought that was a very cool artistic medium that I could potentially get into, and I tried it out. For me, it just wasn't what I thought it would be personally. That was my opinion. But I thought that making stencils like this would be a great thing to use for, you know, stencils for spray painting or airbrush purposes. And they're also good if you batch out multiples of designs. I wouldn't want to do one with this much detail in it. It was just to show you guys that I do this from time to time. But if you had simplistic designs, you could put that poster board in between the layers and get repeatable stencils to where you could just tape the actual stencil to the material and rock and roll and keep making multiples without having to go back to your printer and waste computer ink and things like that. So a really cool alternative there with the poster board stencils. I feel like this fish here could be used in multiple ways. Keep in mind we enlarged the pattern. It was meant to be very small and very minute. I'll show you the pattern here in a second. But you could make it even bigger and cut it out of even thicker material, say 3/4 or 1 inch material. Again, that would be a very slow cut where you would have to take your time and let the blade do the work. But then it could easily freestand on a shelf, desk, or countertop without the need of a base. It would kind of just stand like that on its little fins there. So always options and always versatility, and I always encourage you all to think outside of the box when you approach each and every scroll saw woodworking pattern and project that you come across. Once again, this design came from an older issue of Scroll Saw Woodworking and Crafts magazine by Fox Chapel Publishing, Spring 2024, issue 94 to be precise. In the article and Everything begins on page 40, and there you see their visual representations of the patterns in the magazine. And of course, the full-size pattern that we used in today's video, again, the rest of the patterns are in the pattern pull-out section that's included, is right here. And you guys can see that how the project was originally intended to be cut out to size is not even as big as the actual fish we cut out in today's video. But this would really test your skill over at the scroll saw. The reason I enlarged the pattern was just to hopefully show you guys different ideas and for it to hopefully come across better visually while I was cutting over at the scroll saw and filming. I hope that makes sense. But really cool. I'm really happy with how it came out, and when it completely dries and cures overnight, I can add a hook to it and it'll be ready to be displayed over on the scroll saw woodworking display wall. So another rustic piece to add to the collection. Really, really cool. I hope you guys like this video, and I hope in some way, shape, or form you picked up a tip, trick, or tidbit along the way. That's about all for this one. If you're new to the channel, hopefully you'll click that subscribe button and also follow me across all my social media feeds under the Artisan Pirate name. As always, links to contact me as well as all my social media feeds will always be linked down in the description box below these videos. That's about all for this one, and remember guys, if I can make it or do it, so can you. I'm the Artisan Pirate. Take care, and I'll see you guys real soon.